I think if there was some way to philosophically just take a time out, right? If you could teleport each person far enough away from the earth to just look at it for a few minutes, you wouldn't have to say anything. But the point is, once you get back down here and you realize how fragile this thing is and how extraordinary it is that we beat the odds, that we created something this capable, frankly, that we are this close to defeating racism, as bad as racism may still be, it's a dim shadow of what it once was, right?
Undeniable.
We're this close. And so how could we possibly upend this amazingly successful experiment that beat every odd in favor of the prospect of something better emerging from the ashes?
Yeah.
No way. It's not going to happen. We're this close. We can fix what's wrong if we're willing to be honest about it. But if we're going to be dishonest and pretend that everything we've done till now is a failure because it hasn't been fair, it will be the most pointless exercise in waste in the history of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. I mean, I was listening and I was thinking, I don't think you even need to go all the way out to space to get that perspective. I mean, just look at the last 100 years, right? Look back in 1920 compared to 2020. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 100 years is nothing. In the grand scheme of things, 100 years is no time at all. That's one.
Truly.
That's one person, but the progress that's been made since 1920 is incredible on every level. Whatever ism or phobia someone is concerned about, economically, science, curing diseases. Of course, there were two massive wars in between that time, but relative peace, etc. Or even if you just look, globally. Right? If people were to go out of America and to travel to some other countries and just look at some of the issues and problems that are still going on in many, many other places, the USA starts to look like paradise. It just gives people that perspective of like, oh wow, okay, yeah, things are not perfect, and we should still strive to make things better. But the amount of progress that's been made, it's like, I feel like people are very impatient. I feel like people think that, just even in my own lifetime, the amount of progress that has been made in many, many areas, and even people's ideas shifting on certain ideas and certain topics and things like that. I'm like, wow, that's rapid, that's fast, that's phenomenal. But it's like people just want things to happen yesterday, and they can't just take that moment to be like, whoa, okay, things are a lot better. It's like people don't want to acknowledge. People don't even want to acknowledge the progress. They want to insist that it's just as bad or that it's even getting worse. And yeah, like you said, I think it comes down to honesty. And I think if people aren't honest about both sides of it, then I think things still keep moving forward. But I think that it just creates so much animosity and anger and hostility. And I feel like that's what we're seeing right now. I mean, those riots going on in Portland, going on in some other places, it just seems like pent up energy and anger and hostility. And to me, it's very misdirected. I think all that energy could be put in much better places, to be frank, rather than fighting the police or beating people up in the street or burning down buildings or, calling people things that they're not. I just don't think it's, I don't think it's helpful, and I don't think it's very kind either. I just don't think it's not very nice.
No, it's mean-spirited.
Yeah.
But I want to focus on your point about impatience, because I think this actually is playing a huge role here. So people who have actually built something or accomplished something or been part of the growth of something know things about how the actual world functions that I think are largely absent from these very powerful movements. In other words, let's say that we decided that there was some institution that was necessary to the world becoming better, and that we needed to build a campus for it, some buildings that were well suited to the purpose, that we needed to bring people together, right? Well, there's some amount of money that would create that amount of progress in 3 years, let's say, right? There's no amount of money that will create that amount of progress by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? There's no amount of money you could bring to bear that would create a campus and bring people together and sit them in chairs facing each other tomorrow. So that means that there's some maximum rate and there's some interaction between the resources you're willing to bring to bear and how much progress you can make on the goal. So at some level, we should be asking ourselves the question, if you take the U.S., let's say, in 1950, and you say, well, what's the state of race relations in 1950? And then you say, where do we want to go? Well, to those who had insight in the 50s and 60s, the idea of a colorblind society was evidently the right one.
Yes.
And I agree, it is still the right one, which doesn't mean being deaf to the fact that people have races, right? It means that those things should not bring you any advantage in a courtroom or in the market or any of those things. So from the 1950 starting date, what is the maximum rate of progress we can make towards a colorblind society? And then if you say, well, we made progress, how close did we get to that maximum rate? And the answer is we didn't hit the maximum rate, but we did well, right? We made rapid progress in a small number of generations. And so to take our failure to hit the maximum rate, or worse, our failure to achieve perfection, which is impossible, right, as evidence that we were on the wrong track and that we made no progress at all is just preposterous. So at some level, I want to see this movement replaced by one that is led by people who have enough experience in the world to know what is possible and what progress looks like and how you would measure it, because that's the way we're going to move forward. We're not going to move forward as a result of a bunch of, utopians who don't know how things get built, destroying things in the hopes that that's what progress looks like. That's utterly naive.
I do not scam. Put some respect on my name. Sick like